Hello and welcome to Gene Key Transits with Monifa. And yay, we have a wonderful transit in this new moon for the Lunar New Year. And it is on board. It's what's next. It's what's coming up. It's what's happening, for a lot of the time moving forward. We're going to have a lot of this Aquarius energy making itself known. So it really is. Um, um, Meaningful start. It's profound in a lot of ways that the Lunar New Year begins in Aquarius, right? And so we have in the quantum human design that is the gate 19 of attunement, and in the gene keys that is the shadow of codependence. It is the gift of sensitivity, and it is the city, SIDDHI, of sacrifice. And so it's this juxtaposition of what does it mean to be in relationship with people without losing your sense of self, or without co-opting their energy without permission, this kind of vampirism, this kind of attachment without necessarily the the rejuvenation, the creative source, the nurturing that comes when we're in a high vibrational relationship with somebody else or something else, right? And so we'll talk about that. I think that's going to come up a lot, especially with the gene key applications of what are we talking about? Are we talking about how we're dealing with ourselves? Are we talking about how we're dealing with others? Are we talking about how we're dealing with the world and life, and the truth is, it's all of it. The way we relate is really kind of where I always come back to how are we relating. And we relate to ourselves, we relate to our sense of self, we relate to other people, we relate to who we think people are, we relate to groups of people who we think groups of people are, right? And this is one of those areas that's really going to stand out because it's speaking directly to, what is it? Why do we need each other? And for a long time, it's because um, culturally, we're always looking for the outside to support who we were and who we needed to be, whether that was looking for food and being in the place of a right food source, being in the tribe and having the support of the tribe to help you get that food and be able to make it through winter and things like this. And then in our relationships, how are we continuing our essence of self through children, through what we're building together, right? So that's from a long time ago to this present day. We are still in this juxtaposition of what does it mean to get our needs met, and what does it mean to be part of how the world's needs are met, right? The universality of one is how we can interplay without, I think of it as overly taxing or imbalancing a system, right? And the weird thing is that it's always going to have its fluctuations. So it's not necessarily about being perfect, it's more about being attuned. And that's, I think, why Karen Curry Parker went there with the attunement. It's that sensitivity, which is the gift of the gene keys of being tuned into what's clear for what it takes for our needs to be met and what's clear for others to have the same. And how do we get to contribute to that without taxing ourselves beyond the desired amount or beyond our own capacity, right? So it comes from this innate trauma pattern to have your needs met, which is power. I don't know if y'all have been paying attention, but we've been doing a podcast called Verve Vision. If you go back to the beginning of Verve Vision last year, we talked about power from the book. Oh, I lost the name of the book, but it was the first book. We talked about power, right? And so looking at that, you can start having that conversation of, is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? And I think because it's been imbalanced in how people allow it to be sourced and how they use it to interact with others, we tend to shy away from it. We tend to say, oh, I don't really want power. That's not what I'm looking for. But we can see, we're going to talk about a little bit later how that shows up in our relationships. And when we deny that we need things and that it takes power to get them, which is just energy. We don't have a problem with energy, right? So, yeah, so if we can't have that conversation and like we're not taking the responsibility of what it means to have power and to get what we need, right? So yeah, so that's the balance, is being able to have that conversation and to be conscious in our interactions so that we aren't, blindly using our power. So this is ology keys, and everything that is happening is just an archetype of how energy plays out in the world. And so this energy from the 19th key is about mutation. It's about having something shift from what it was, might not be useful or not purposeful to the body anymore. It could be in the body, it could be in plant life, it could be in the animal kingdom. This mutation is how the life energy becomes what's needed for what's next. It's this idea of us destroying to evolve, right? And so it's nothing necessarily innately wrong in that, right? It's just part of what happens. We live and we die, and then we become what's next in that energy flow, right? And so that's just part of life. That's what we're doing out here. And it's okay, right? The genius, what I like to call the genius or the superpower of this in the gene keys, is that it makes us super attuned to what's going on with other people, what they need. It makes us super attuned to what's going on in resourcing of self and right of what we need, right? And so if we can get super attuned and aligned with that, then it will have its natural flow, like all of natural life, right? It's going to have a natural flow. It's going to have a more profound or producing or productive flow or co-creative. Um, I think of that as prosperity, like it's starting to feed everything around it and not just itself, type of thing, because it's already full, right? So that attunement allows for that, right? And then so coming back, how are we allowing that to influence who we are with ourselves, who we are in a relationship, who we are with the groups of people, right? So I'm always going to come back to like, how do we recognize this? I think a lot of us have recognized this, and we tend to give it a broad swath, and we start calling people vampires, and we start calling people narcissists. And I'm not saying those things aren't real and that there's not a reason why we have these characterizations, but I'm saying that it comes from something as minute of just getting our needs met, right? And so it can be tiny, tiny, tiny example, or it can be an exaggerated, distorted example that has never been, balanced in any way, right? So on the repressive side for the gene keys, it looks like being needy. So this is something that happens in ourselves and with other people. If you've ever recognized somebody who's just scared of being alone, they don't care who they're with, they just want to be with somebody, right? It can be, anybody. It could be somebody who's treating them well or somebody who's not treating them well. Um, and it can cause people to like latch on to relationships that are not serving them, like violent relationships or relationships or they're being abusive or emotionally any kind of way, right? So this, that comes from, again, this need, or that not need, but this idea that we can only get our needs met if we are with another person, right? So that's the shadow of that repressive side. It can make you afraid of being alone. It can make you feel guilty as well. So how does that happen? If somebody else is trying to get their needs met by making you feel guilty, right? So you can be overly giving of yourself if you feel like, oh, maybe I didn't give enough yet. They still need me. I have to keep giving because they still need me, right? So it comes on, we're looking at both sides of that relationship problem. And in within ourselves, this can be a relationship with food and how we're nourishing and energizing our body, which is a form of power, and all of that. So it can, that's a well-known thing. If it's an emotional eating, it's because you're feeling alone or unfulfilled if we're not having that food connectivity, right? So it comes out in all these kinds of ways. In the reactive side, it looks like isolating and like trying to get away from people. It's not, and I'm an introvert, like diehard introvert. So I've had a lot of shadow patterns around that. But this is not that. This is isolation out of refusing attention because you're angry that you're not getting what you need, right? And so you might not actually share the anger, but you might say, I don't need you anymore. You might say, oh, well, I don't need attention. I can handle it all by myself. This is kind of our rebel generations, our I can do it my own way. I don't need you or your way of doing it. It can turn into stuff like that. Um, and but the difference ultimately in how kind of introverts reject and how this is playing out is that they are not doing it without anybody seeing that happen, right? They're not going to say, oh, I'm tired, I don't need anybody, to no one. They're going to say it to someone, right? And whether that's by actions or words, right? And so, or somebody shows up and say, well, like I have time, like I've seen this in people where you weren't available when they wanted you, but then when you are available, they say, oh, no, I'm busy, right? And there's no kind of next meeting time. They feel the need to reject you because you rejected them. And they're going to wait until you want or ready to connect to say that, right? They don't say it, well, I'm not going to be in touch in the next few days, or they're not going to say it even, oh, I'm sorry, I missed your message, I was out of town, right? It's going to be something where they can know that you're there to witness the rejection, right? Um, or to say they don't need you because they have somebody else and they're going to find their own person, that they can find somebody better even, right? So that's how I've seen it play out in our relationships with people. So whenever you're noticing that, just recognize, like energy flows, and then it's like neither bad or good. If we're feeding either side of that, then we're kind of perpetuating that pattern and cycle. So moving on to something about um, like kind of just letting that go. If it's somebody that you want to continue to have a relationship with, and you just let it go. You don't feed it. You don't feed that and say, oh, I'm sorry I wasn't available. You're not sorry. You had something to do, right? So you don't need to lie to make them feel better, but just recognize that just because I wasn't available doesn't mean that I don't love you, don't appreciate you, right? And when it's the right time and you're attuned and aligned to what you have in your needs met, and then you can say, oh, just so you know, I love you, loved you before, still love you, hasn't changed, right? Um, so that's like our relationships and stuff. So for our businesses, I'm all about the legacy business and even legacy events that we build to solidify how we want to share what we have to offer the world and how we want to be seen in the world, that we're not just cogs in the wheel, we're not just punching the clock for other organizations and businesses, that we have our own voices to share, right? So I've picked out and I have my whole list of things that I look at of HR, marketing, sales, finance, management, fulfillment, customer service, R&D, research and development, and education. Like there's a ton of stuff happening in a business and in an event. Any container is how I think of that. Any container has to have these ways of interacting and flowing with other people, other resources, and all the things, Okay. And so that's just the way it is. That's just how we've been built up and through um a myriad of energetic frameworks. Okay. So I'm not just getting this from business. I'm getting this also from just how energy, how it works, how it organizes, and how it communicates or shares or relates, right? So marketing will be our first, that's my fave. I probably can relate everything to marketing because that's how my mind works. To me, marketing is the business version of speaking and singing. And all of what I think of as my wisdom, my innate truth of knowingness comes through my understanding of voice and what it means to be in flow with your voice in real time and with power and passion and authenticity and memorability. So marketing is obviously exactly where we want to be with that. So there's this conundrum that happens in marketing. It's kind of coming up with the codependency and sensitivity argument, I guess. Like it could be an argument, but it is the one and the same thing. That's what Gene Keys is constantly reminding us, just because it shows or we perceive it as negative or it shows or we perceive it as positive, doesn't mean that it's something separate. It is coming from the same evolution of energy. And that's all archetyping is. So, marketing is this juxtaposition of showing up, right? So, showing up in a way that may be different or showing like that demarcates you from the rest of the market, right? So that it makes, so it's this individualism tends to be a thing, and especially with our solopreneurs, that becomes a conversation. How do I stand out? I'm a coach amongst a million coaches. How do I stand out? Right. And so some of us are also artists, creatives. A lot of us want to be completely different. We want to be totally outside the box because we want our artistic and our creative discernment to shine through, right? And as you can see, it's not always profitable in business to have that kind of full-blown eccentricity. And I'll tell you why, right? So if we're so concerned about standing out, it starts to look like that rebel idea we were talking about in the description of the energy, right? And that rebel idea, what happens is that nobody relates. In other words, the only people that could relate are the people that have had your experiences and your unique viewpoint. And that does not mean that you don't share that extreme difference if you have it. Most of us don't. That's the other kind of part of being a rebel is that we're all kind of different versions of each other. So if we think there's nobody like us, then we're probably missing something, right? And which is not a bad thing. If that's the hard part, I think for an artist, they feel like that's a bad thing. Uh, it really is in business about being able to say, oh, yeah, the reason I'm so good at this is because I've been there where you are and where you may be feeling. So that's being the same as somebody. And so if we're too far in that uniqueness, we're saying we're not, it's hard to connect to anybody. And so they may not feel like they understand or think they need you because it's not in the realm of what they think they need, right? That's not about needing, but I'm not going to go there right now. So it's about serving. And so how do we balance having our needs met of an individual voice and unique qualities and everything that's super only us, the only us, because only our life story and our experiences can become a me, right? No matter how close somebody gets to my work and what I do, it'll always be extremely unique just because of my life and my experiences, right? So you don't have to fight for that. And to balance that, we need to also have an understanding of what do people know already that they need in reference to that life and experience, in reference to what we have and the gifts that we have to offer. And so sometimes in our understanding, it's not a wrong understanding. Like if you didn't have something unique to offer, you wouldn't be offering something in your business, right? So it's not that you don't have something unique. It's that if people understood how much they needed it, they would be doing the same thing, right? So you want to be able to talk to them in a way that says, listen, this is actually, you're looking for this, and I know because of my experience with that I can help you, right? So so that marketing piece, I could talk about marketing all day. Let's move on. Management. It also comes into the idea of management because you have what needs to be done. You have what needs to be done for the business and what keeps the business going and keeps the business growing and all those things and those tasks and then you have the needs of the team, the individual, yourself, even like what your personal needs are as a human being, and what keeps you vital and productive and prosperous within yourself so that you can be that for the people that are showing up, right? So that management and like that takes that level of balance. If we're moving too much into codependence, it looks like, well, I need more from you because that's what the business needs, and it's just keep feeding the machine, so to speak. And then if we're too focused on our personal needs, and like if we're getting to the point where we're overbalancing there, then the needs of the business aren't being met, right? So it's always about a little bit of both. I love my mentor, Stasha Washburn. She has a podcast too on YouTube. You can find it. Uh, I always mess up the podcast name. I believe it's period besties. It's really cool. Check it out. And so, but talking about that, are we allowing ourselves to have our full natural cycles, that we're resting at the right time, we're feeding ourselves well in the right way at different phases of your menstrual cycle? I'm also a certified period coach, so I can answer those questions too as part of my alchemy work. But with all that I speak about, I can't get super deep into it. So I always reference her because she, and anybody who's had any problems with their cycle, like, there's just so much information. But more than that, like as anybody who has a menstrual cycle, you want to know how your work is impacting your body and vice versa. Business is a real thing and a real monster, and it takes some nuance and sensitivity, that gift from the gene keys, to properly balance these things. Okay. All right. And then fulfillment. So fulfillment is that you are giving what you said you would give for the value that they said they would offer, right? Like that they would give. So when somebody pays for something and you said you're going to do something, that you fulfill that. And what I've seen a lot, especially for coaching, is that people overcompensate here because sometimes they feel like they're not doing enough, or that if they don't do more, if they're not outstanding at some defined level, that we are somehow not good enough and they're going to go somewhere else or something like this. You can see how close these ideas are to relationships, right? Like if you don't feel like you're worthy and good enough and worth loving, then you might always worry that somebody would leave you or cheat on you or something like this. It's the same thing here. Like that's the difficulty of business. It really asks those deep questions of who you think you are, right? Like you have to ask those questions of yourself, um, and that's why I do this work. Who do you know? This is that energy. If you have this energy in your chart, in your gene key profile, even if you don't, if you're just relating with people who have this energy in their gene key profile, then it helps you understand like how can we see how much somebody might misinterpret whether we're honoring our agreement of service, right? Or how it helps us to better word these things when we're making offerings, and to stay in integrity, really, because sometimes we're offering a lot just to get people in the door. And then we're realizing, ooh, I'm one person. The fulfillment of that doesn't quite make sense for my personal needs. You see what I'm saying? So how do we do that without going to the other side and saying, well, I'm always good enough, whether I fulfill this thing or not? Right? Which is true. I mean, you are worthy, regardless of what you do or do not do. Okay. So that's true. And to be in a nice relationship with each other and the earth and our environments and society and our customers, then we can't just reject what would be fulfilling to what we agree to fulfill, right? And so we're not providing lack on our side or their side, and that's what this energy is about, right? So that's what I have for you this time with our full moon in Aquarius. Yeah. If you have any questions for me, I am available. I'm available. Oh, by the way, okay. So our first podcast of the year for Verve and Vision will be on Thursday, the 29th. So if you're watching this after that, you can jump back to it. If you're watching it before that, I'll see you there. It is a live broadcast, so I will see you there. And it'll be on this channel, YouTube. And what else? Oh, and then the VIP Day Amplify You is coming up. It is gonna be fabulous. Okay. Amplify You is well, I do a VIP day pretty much once a year. We're heading into vocal alchemy season. We're doing our live cohort, which is only one cohort a year, in February. So I'm just going to go ahead and let y'all know that information for that is in the description, right? So if you're ever curious about what am I up to, what am I doing next, how do I serve, check that out. There's a ton of videos. For me, again, everything starts with voice. So you'll see that my voice videos, which is my Oman's vocal resonance method. And you'll see how I apply it to mostly singing voice there. But I talk about how it applies to all the other ways of voicing and what I think of as self-expression for everybody on a daily basis through my Gene Keys work and through my podcasts. I do more than one. I like to do interviews as well. And through my events, I do summits. So a little bit of everything is over here. So you can see and sample what's going on with Monifa Harris, Eva. I'm here for you. I hope that you're having a fabulous beginning to your January New Year and that you have an even more fabulous Lunar New Year for those who are celebrating. Happy New Year! It's the 29th, for at least on my calendar, on my coast. It can sometimes vary slightly. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So making space, making way for what wants to be created in this new year. And yeah, wishing you all the best, and I'll see you on the next video.